When you think of hacking today, you probably picture these massive billion-dollar ransomware gangs, right? But it wasn't always like that. It started as this community, really, just driven by pure curiosity. We're going to dive into the story of how that open, kind of exploratory world was forced into the shadows, how it became the sophisticated digital underground we know today. It's really a story about how an entire culture, well, how it lost its innocence. Okay, so picture this. It's 1989. We're just days away from a NASA space launch, and the staff logs in to see this message: Worms against nuclear killers. This was from something called the wank worm, and it was one of the very first big politically motivated cyber attacks. And it was a huge sign, right? A clear signal that the digital world wasn't just a playground anymore. It was turning into a battlefield. But to really get how we got here, we've got to go back, way back, to the beginning. So let's set the scene. This is before the internet was in every single home, right? There was this kind of golden age of hacking. And look, this wasn't about crime, it wasn't about malice, it was just about pure, unfiltered curiosity. Think of it as the era of the digital corner pub. And when we say digital corner pub, you gotta forget everything you know about massive server farms in the cloud. The tech back then was, it was incredibly simple. We're talking about something called a bulletin board system, a BBS. And a lot of the time, that was literally just a single computer sitting in someone's bedroom, hooks up to a single phone line, that's it. That was the hub. That's where these digital explorers would meet up, share their ideas, trade secrets, even make friends, all over a screechy dial-up mode. And let's be clear, nobody was getting rich from this stuff. Financial gain, it wasn't even on the radar. In this world, the real currency, the thing that really mattered, was respect. It was all about the thrill of the challenge, the excitement of exploring this brand new digital frontier and getting that nod of approval from your peers because you figured out how to open the next digital door. For all their kind of anti-establishment vibe, this community had a surprisingly strong ethical code. The rules were super simple. Don't damage anything, don't change any information. Well, except for maybe covering your tracks in the logs. The idea was you could look, you could learn, but you absolutely did not cause harm. The whole mantra was kind of like exploring a national park, right? Leave it exactly as you found it. But yeah, this sort of idyllic, golden era, it just couldn't last. A perfect storm was brewing. You had temptation growing from inside the community, and at the same time, this immense pressure coming from the outside. And that combination was about to force this whole open world deep into the shadows. This was the turning point. So the first crack in the foundation actually came from within. The community basically split into two camps. On one side, you had the old guard, the original ethos of just sharing information and intellectual curiosity. And on the other, you had the rise of what they called carding, which is just a fancy word for credit card fraud. And to those original hackers, this new stuff was, well, it was less noble. One of them even said it required the technical skill of a wind-up toy. Ouch. It just completely violated their golden rules, and it created this deep, deep rift. And at the exact same time, the outside world started closing in. Fast. We're talking new computer crime laws, police crackdowns, it all started happening. And the response was immediate. Those open, friendly corner pubs, they slammed their doors shut. They became these secret invitation-only clubs. You couldn't just show up anymore. You had to prove your skills just to get into an inner sanctum. Paranoia just took over the whole scene. You had guys like the legendary hacker Parr, who literally went on the run, spreading fake rumors about himself just to stay one step ahead of the feds. So yeah, the entire dynamic just shifted. The days of friendly exploration were over. Gone. It was now this high-stakes game of cat and mouse. You had the hackers on one side, and on the other, you had law enforcement and a media that was just eating this story up. And the media, of course, they latched on to the most dramatic story they could find. Hackers weren't curious explorers anymore. No, they were painted as these digital villains, these computer-literate hooligans. And that narrative, it just created this wave of public fear. It's really what cemented the modern stereotype of the malicious hacker that we still think of today. The headlines themselves kind of became a weapon in this fight. You'd see these reports of huge financial losses. Citibank hackers score $500,000. But a lot of the time, they were wildly exaggerated. It created this powerful hacker hype. And of course, this public fear was the perfect excuse for authorities to push for stricter laws and even more aggressive crackdowns. It just fueled this vicious cycle. But, sometimes the hackers just couldn't resist poking the bear. There's this legendary prank where a young Australian hacker gets into the system of Cliff Stoll, who was, at the time, the world's most famous hacker catcher. He leaves this simple, taunting message, and the New York Times runs a front-page story with this headline, "Cuckoo's got egg on his face." I mean, can you imagine? It must have felt like a huge victory for the underground, but what it really did was shine a massive, totally unwanted spotlight right on top of them. And all this pressure, it led to this really powerful and, I think, completely unintended consequence. See, the authorities thought they could just stamp out hacking, simple as that. But they were so wrong. The big lesson the community learned wasn't don't hack. No, the lesson was don't get caught. So instead of destroying the hacker community, all this pressure actually forged it in fire. It forced an evolution. It created a brand new kind of hacker, one that was way more sophisticated and way more formidable than anyone had ever seen before. So, what did this new, evolved hacker actually look like? Well, for starters, they became ghosts. They learned how to hide in plain sight by encrypting absolutely everything: their hard drives, their data connections, even their voice calls. Then they went on the offensive. They stopped just using known security holes. Instead, they started finding their own by meticulously reading the source code of big companies like Microsoft, line by painful line. The real holy grail, though, that was installing their own hidden backdoors into software before it ever got released to the public. And in a final kind of dark, ironic twist, they started turning on each other. Why? Because they realized that other hackers were the perfect victims. They're the one group of people who can never call the police. Which brings us to this final, really paradoxical question. The whole campaign to get rid of that original curious hacker, I mean, in a way it worked. That culture is gone. But in the process of trying to crush it, did law enforcement just end up accelerating an evolution? Did they accidentally create a new generation of hackers who were more skilled, more invisible, and in the end, a far greater threat than anyone could have ever imagined?